crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really excited about tonight's topic of conversation. Really interesting and one that we're hearing a great deal more about anyway. Prescription errors and bad drugs. Seems like they're in the news most every day. Some sort of an issue there. Going to dive into that in a moment, but first a couple of reminders, kind of the ground rules in case you're new with us. All throughout the program, there are ways at the bottom of the screen where you can call, text, email, and be a part of our conversation. Really, the show is better whenever that is taking place, so take advantage of that if a question pops into your mind. Also, Hollis Wright makes available during each and every broadcast of the attorneys some of their attorneys actually standing by live to speak with you. So it's a free, confidential, and off-air conversation that is yours for the taking. The numbers to know for that, you can text at 205-670-1949, or you can give them a call at area code 844-LAW-TALK. That is 844-529-8255. Leading our conversation tonight, Michael Eldridge from Hollis Wright. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, David. Just two of us tonight.
I know. I kind of like this idea. We can just dive right in and really pick it apart, can't we? So first of all, tell kind of the viewers tonight, maybe you've been on a few times before, but maybe folks are seeing you for the first time. So tell us about you, your law practice, and your career, and kind of how long you've been at Hollis Wright.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm at Hollis Wright. I've been there for the past couple of years. Before that, I did kind of the opposite work, but the same work. I was on the defense side of the bar, and I defended insureds and insurance companies in various claims. Typically, trucking is the type of insureds that I defended, trucking companies that were being sued. And at some point a couple years ago, I made the decision when Josh and Tyler and Carter asked me to. It seemed like a great opportunity, and I've enjoyed it. And I've got to learn not only the things that I had experience with in the past, but a wide variety of things that we handle at Hollis Wright.
Right. Well, I know you're an awesome addition, and they all speak highly of you, so glad to have you here. So let's kind of dive into what we're going to be talking about tonight. Prescription errors and bad drugs. What is a prescription error, first of all? What are we talking about there? And really, how does that even happen?
Yeah, so, and you mentioned in the start that we're starting to hear more and more about this, right? And I think the reason that is because as the medical field advances and there's more and more development of these drugs that attack specific medical problems, we're seeing more drugs in the market, and anytime you add volume to the market, it adds room for error.
Right.
And so when you ask, what do we mean by a prescription error? What that is simply is it's a situation where a patient either receives the wrong drug from what they were prescribed, or they receive the right drug, but it's the wrong dosage.
Okay.
And when that occurs, essentially is in one of two ways. It's either the doctor that's prescribing, or the hospital or the nurse that's making the prescription has an error in terms of the prescription or the dosage, or it happens with the pharmacist. And the pharmacist who's filling the prescription makes an error in filling it and puts the wrong drug in there or puts the wrong dosage, which can obviously be dangerous.
Right. So in your experience, what are the most common causes of medication errors?
So from what we have seen, the cause is not, and this is not always the case, but it's not a situation where we see that these doctors are incompetent, or the nurses or the hospital or the pharmacist doesn't know what they are supposed to do. What we're seeing is that this is simply human error.
Right.
That there is a circumstance where in terms of filling a prescription, that the pharmacist, not because they didn't know what to put in there, but because of something that occurs, that they make a mistake, and that's how the wrong drug gets in there. And that can be because of a number of different reasons of how these mistakes occur, but we're seeing that it is human error in terms of the process of getting the prescription to the doctor, from the doctor to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist actually filling the prescription and getting it to the patient.
Right. I've heard numbers of the numbers of Americans that are on prescription drugs and the amounts of pills dispensed. I would just think from a volume standpoint, every day there is kind of that there are going to be mistakes made because they're human.
Absolutely. So You talk about the volume, but you also talk about the number of drugs that we're dealing with. So these pharmacists are getting, and they don't call them by the brand names, right? They call them by the drug names.
Okay.
And a lot of these drugs, you may have a heart pressure medicine that has a drug that's has a name that's very similar to an ADD medicine that has a name that's very similar to another type of drug. And they hear the wrong drug, and I don't want to stereotype doctors, but I don't know if you've ever seen their handwriting, typically not the best handwriting, and they read that wrong, and then they fill that prescription and they put the wrong drug in for the wrong person. Names of patients, right? So if you're at a pharmacy and you've got a lot of prescriptions coming in, sometimes there's situations where accidentally a pharmacy tech or the pharmacist mixes up two patients, gives you my drugs, gives me your drugs. And it's just, it goes out and those people take it, and they're obviously, it's dangerous because they're taking the wrong drug, first of all, which has side effects, but they're not taking the drug that they need to treat whatever their medical problem is.
For you, is this theory, or are you giving examples of things you've actually seen in your practice?
Yeah, we see it all the time, and that's why I say that we're not putting this on the doctors and the pharmacists in terms of incompetency. We have learned that, because it's obviously, look, if somebody has the wrong drug, we know it. Right? I mean, it's hard to defend yourself if you got a drug that they were prescribed this and this is what's in the bottle. There's obviously a mistake. And what we found is it's typically not because of incompetence or because of breach of the standard of care, but because of just errors that happen because of the volume that we talked about.
Right. So when receiving a drug for the first time, what are some things to look out for kind of to help us make sure that we don't find ourselves in this kind of scenario that you're talking about?
Yeah, I want to talk about this more as we go, but I think it's communication with the patient and the doctor and the patient and the pharmacist, right? So there are certain questions and conversations that need to happen. Don't just take a prescription and go get it filled because you were given it. You need to know why you got that prescription, what the drug is, what it is treating, and what the side effects are. And if you carry that communication from the medical facility to the pharmacy, it is very unlikely, or if there is an error, it's more likely that they're going to catch it.
Yeah. So you're talking about having a conversation with the doctor or the nursing staff, just finding out a little more on the front end to arm you with information that you could take to the pharmacist.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And that kind of, I would think that probably kind of arms you with some information so you know what you're getting into, but sometimes asking those questions just kind of triggers and can be a preventive as far as the mistakes go?
Yeah, especially with new drugs, right? So I mean, if you take a drug that you take and you're familiar with, you're going to know what it looks like for the most part. If it reads different, but with new drugs, you need to know what you're being treated for and what the drug is. Because if the pharmacist comes back and says this treats heart palpitations and you're doing it for migraines, and you say I don't have heart palpitations, right? And we know how to fix that at that point.
Right. There's so many people that are so hesitant to have those conversations and ask questions, and you feel, hey, I'm going to ask the dumb question, but with what you've seen, it could really have incredible consequences to your health.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think we always want to keep those lines of communications open, because as the patient, you deserve to know, and you need to know those things, and we want to avoid those errors. That's the goal.
Yeah. All right, time for us to step aside, take our first break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder, Hollis Wright all over social media, like Michael was talking about, it seems like every day there's some kind of an issue here, so a great way to keep up and to be educated and informed is through social media. You'll find Hollis Wright on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all over. So a great, if you're on social media, you're going to want to follow them and follow along to make sure that you stay informed. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming up right after this short break.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys. I started practicing law more than 20 years ago with a mission: advocate for personal injury victims in their darkest days. Recognizing that there were others who stood with me in that purpose, we built the Hollis Wright team from the ground up. Now with 25 employees here to help personal injury victims when they need it the most, our team is here for you. If you've been injured in an accident, always make Hollis Wright the first law firm you call. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back into the Attorneys. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Before we get back into our conversation on prescription errors and prescription medications and some of the issues pertaining to that, I want to remind you about the attorneys that are standing by live to speak with you. So you can text them at 205-670-1949, or again, the number if you would like to give them a call. It's 844-LAW-TALK, 844-529-8255. Continuing our conversation with Michael Eldridge about prescription errors and bad drugs. And we touched on this, but you've got some really interesting tidbits here about if you're receiving a drug for the first time, kind of some of the things you can look out for. And I like the way you break this down. So let's kind of go through some of your tips here.
Okay, the first one, and I always want to say it first because it's the one that scares me the most, and I think a lot of people will relate to this, is children.
Right.
For the most part, the drugs that we are taking for certain illnesses are the same drugs that children are taking, just at different dosages. And when a child is receiving a drug and gets a prescription, obviously the child doesn't have the knowledge that the parent has or whoever the guardian is about what they're taking. Right. And so if you have, for the most part, the pediatricians are going to be working off what a child's dosage is based off what the age range is. Mm-hmm. But children get into other circumstances where they have to see other providers, or they're in a hospital, especially they've been admitted into a hospital, that they're going to be prescribed drugs that a doctor may be used to prescribing at a level that is not the child dosage, which can be very dangerous for children to receive dosages, an adult dosage of a drug when they need a child dosage. Right. Anytime I filled a prescription or I had a prescription that is written for my child, which I have a 10-month-old, I talk with the doctor and the pharmacist to confirm that this is the child dosage, not the adult dosage, just to confirm. Right. There's no reason not to with that.
Right. Okay. So the first one, check for adult versus child dosage. Second point here is you have something contraindications. What do you mean by that?
Well, so a contraindication is going to be a situation where you may have a medical condition that you're not going to that doctor about, right? Let's say that you have a liver condition where you don't produce the right liver enzymes, but you're going to the doctor because you started having migraines. Okay. So you go to a neuro or a general physician about migraines, and they don't know about your liver condition, right? So they prescribe you a drug to treat the migraines, but what if that drug interacts in a way with your liver problem that causes problem? These drugs interact not only with one another, but they interact with medical conditions that we have that you're not treating for. So that's why when you go see a doctor, a good doctor is going to get a thorough past medical history. Yeah. And you need to make sure that as a patient, that we're providing a thorough history. And if we have something that we know about, right? If we have diabetes, if we have cancer, that we let the pharmacist know, hey, is this drug, because the pharmacist knows how the drugs work at a very intimate level. And so if you talk to them during that consultation, say, just be upfront. I've got this condition. How will this affect it?
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask your opinion, but we better not even ask because I'm curious because I just from family members, that is not all that uncommon for one medical facility to not communicate effectively with another one, and then they prescribe something, and then this guy says, well, you know, he's had this problem, that's going to be an issue there. I'm curious if it has to do with education, or if it's because so often now the kind of the time to get patients in and get them out, and even medical facilities are being pushed to do that as well, kind of almost a numbers game.
Yeah, and it's almost impossible, in my opinion, for the if you're seeing a lot of different doctors, for them to all communicate in that way.
Yeah.
But that's where the pharmacist comes into play, because they're able to see what your prescription history is and what drugs you're actively taking. And if those interact with one another, and especially in a negative way, they should be able to pick that up. So if two doctors are prescribing you two drugs, either that do the same thing or that interact with each other in a negative way, at the pharmacist level, that should be caught, and that's where it should be resolved. And that's why it's so important at all levels that everybody do their part, from the doctor, the medical facility, as a patient, and then ultimately at the pharmacy.
Yeah, the pharmacist has that kind of final line of defense.
That's
All
correct.
right, the third thing you've got here is allergies or allergic reactions.
So, and this is somewhat similar to the contraindications, but it's different in terms that some people react naturally in a negative way to certain drugs. Penicillin is one that every time you've been to a doctor, they say, are you allergic to penicillin? Because it's in so many antibiotics. And there are people that, you know, they have allergic reactions, sometimes fatal or very medically serious allergic reactions. And again, this kind of goes back to that medical history and things that you know about yourself that you've got to provide the doctor with, because there are certain things that certain people are predisposed to in terms of their reaction to certain drugs. And a doctor should do their due diligence in prescribing the drugs and understanding the drugs to determine whether or not that you fit that mold, as should the pharmacist.
Yeah, I see a theme here, and it is communicating with everyone, and everyone communicating better. The final tip you got here is reaction with other drugs. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and we touched on that a little bit, but obviously, you know, our high school health class, when they were telling us that we shouldn't drink and do other drugs, and they told us about the multiplier effect, right? Alcohol it can make you react this way if you do this other type of drug. It's the same way with prescription drugs. Look, just because these are approved by the FDA and they're made by Pfizer and these mega corporations, it doesn't mean that they're completely safe, especially when you mix certain drugs together. So if you're taking, let's say, a medicine for heart pressure every day, and you have an illness where you've got to be prescribed other drugs to get rid of that illness, you need to know whether or not the drugs that the new drugs are going to interact in a negative way to either make you react or to make your heart pressure medicine not do what it's supposed to.
Right, yeah. Whenever I watch it's almost humorous when you're watching a commercial about a drug, when at the end, whenever they list the side effects, they spend as much time on the possible side effects as they do talking about the medication. I'm curious, I assume they're required to do so in that instance, but are side effects, are they always provided with the medication?
In terms of physically provided? Well, absolutely not. I mean, we've gotten prescription drugs before, right? And we go to the pharmacist, and we don't always get a pamphlet.
Right.
But sometimes we do.
Yeah.
The one I always think about is when I get a steroid pack, when I get strep throat or something, they give you the box, you know, and it has a little pamphlet in there. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be one. I know we're kind of playing one on TV right now. But I challenge you to go read the material that they give you. Because, David, I know some doctors and some pharmacists who would be confused about what's written in there. And even if they're not, as lay people, it's not providing you with the information. It's not answering the questions, because it's all written for the medical field and for the drug field, right? And for those people who know that information. We don't know what half of those words mean as laypersons. And that's why it's important for the doctor and the pharmacist to understand that their job is to make sure that you understand what drugs you're taking. And you understand what those side effects could be, and that they do their due diligence to get an accurate medical history and drug history from you.
Okay, time for our final break. Let's step aside right here as we do so. Want to remind you about the attorneys standing by live to speak with you. 205-670-1949 or toll free 844-LAW-TALK. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm attorney Bobby Bell with Hollis Wright Law Firm. In today's world, social media is all around us. It is common for many people to post on social media regarding their life and activities on a daily basis. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and similar social media are a great way to stay connected to others and to share your experiences and thoughts. Some seemingly innocent social media posts, however, can have devastating effects if you're involved in litigation, especially in a personal injury claim, a contested divorce, or a child custody battle. Courts regularly allow adverse parties access to the other side's social media accounts, allowing relevant posts to be presented as evidence. These rules have allowed social media to become a hotbed of information in the litigation world. In fact, we are seeing more and more preservation orders issued by courts requiring you to collect and save any and all social media activity. Therefore, it's advisable that even before there's litigation, lawyers should advise their clients that social media content may be discoverable. Here are a few helpful tips. 1. Do not post anything about the case. This includes posts regarding conversations or meetings with your attorneys, remarks about your injuries, negative remarks about the opposing party. Do not post anything you would not want read in open court to either a judge or a jury. 2. Avoid new friend requests from people you do not know. Many law firms and insurance offices may attempt to have employees follow you on social media in an attempt to gain information. 3. Limit adding new photos, check-ins, photo tagging, etc. Seemingly innocent posts may be used against you. Regular check-ins at restaurants, parties, or other events with friends can cast doubt on any claims of loss of enjoyment of life, pain and suffering, or emotional distress, since you appear to be living life as usual. 4. Increase your privacy settings. Many social media sites frequently update and change their privacy settings. In the litigation context, it is possible you may have to preserve and present anything you posted. Therefore, we encourage you to be smart and careful when using social media. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WBTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, our final segment here, just a little over 5 minutes. So if you want to take advantage of that opportunity to speak with the attorneys from Hollis Wright, standing by live to speak with you, well, then go ahead and get on the phone and give them a call. Here with Michael Eldridge, not a whole lot of time remaining here, talking about bad drugs and prescription errors. Let me ask you this. What about people who are in the hospital and how they are dispensed medications? What are some things they need to be aware of, I guess, if they're in that scenario?
Well, it's problematic, right, compared to when we're in a doctor's office and then we go to the pharmacy. When you're in the hospital, you lose a lot of control. Right. Most of the time, because if you're admitted to the hospital, that means that your injuries or the condition that you're in is worse. You may not be cognizant. Right. And you're also not making as many decisions, right? I mean, doctors are putting in orders. It's going to the pharmacy at the hospital. They're coming back in and they're administering the drugs. But it's the same across the board in terms of whose responsibility is. And in fact, I would say that it rises a pharmacist's responsibility at a hospital and the doctor's responsibility at a hospital, because they have to understand that they have now lost, that the patient has lost a little bit of control, and they need to do the things that are necessary to make sure that the medications that are being administered in the right way, that are the right medications, the right dosage, and they don't interact with one another in a negative way, and that there is pure communication between all the different areas of the hospital, the teams that are treating that patient.
And I would think, if someone may be unconscious, I guess that is where a family member could step in and be the one that asks those questions to make sure that communication is taking place.
I think so to some extent. The good news is I think that there is more precaution taking at hospitals, because unlike once you're prescribed the drug and you go home and it's your job to administer your own medication, all of that's going to be documented, right? When you're in the hospital, and it's going to show what drugs they gave you and when they gave them to you and how much they gave. So they're going to be very careful to do it the right way. Right. But yeah, I mean, if you have a loved one in the hospital, certainly try to keep open the line of communication.
You hear a lot about about a term called bad drugs and people getting bad drugs and issues there. First of all, what does that even mean? What are we talking about with bad drugs?
So when we talk about bad drugs, the most simple way to put it, and I'm a simple person, so that's the way I try to do it, is a drug is a bad drug when it's determined that whatever benefit the drug provides, if it's outweighed by the risk of taking it, then it's a bad drug. It means that it's unreasonably risky to take it. So the FDA is going to monitor that, and if it's determined that the side effects of these drugs, or these drugs interact with other drugs, or they cause cancer, they cause other side effects that are so dangerous that they should not be on the market, that's a bad drug.
Right. All right. So if you believe you have been prescribed and you've gotten hold of a bad drug, what course of action should you take?
So a bad drug, you're going to know it typically because the FDA is going to release it. There's going to be adverse incident reports about that drug, and then typically you'll see some release. But if you were a victim of a prescription error, let's say that you went and you have a medication that they filled the wrong medication, they filled the wrong dosage, and you took it and you were injured because of that. I think the first thing that you want to do is keep that drug. People have this inclination to go back to the pharmacist and say, this is wrong, and then you give it back to the pharmacist, and guess what? That evidence is gone.
Right.
You need to keep that drug, and you need to go back to your doctor and tell them that you need another prescription, and then I would contact an attorney to talk about whether or not you have a claim, because if you got the wrong drug, someone made a mistake and can be held liable from a civil standpoint if you were injured.
Right. Believe it or not, we're just about out of time. 1.5 minutes is all we have remaining, but I wanted to give you an opportunity just for a final thought and a final charge for our viewers tonight.
Yeah, David, I think, like we hit on so many times, it's communication. And these doctors have a lot of control. The pharmacist has a lot of control. The drug companies have a lot of control.
Right.
And as the patient, it feels sometimes like we're just operating at whatever they tell us to do. Right. And we have control because we are allowed to communicate with them at every level. What is this drug? What does it do? Why is it being prescribed? How much is being prescribed? Is it the adult doses? Is it the child doses? How is it going to interact? We can ask those questions. But ultimately, whether we do that or not, it is their responsibility as the doctor and as the pharmacist to make sure that those errors don't occur. And when they do, they are subject to claims when they make those mistakes.
Yeah, really important stuff. Thank you, sir.
It's good to be
Good
on
to
here.
see you. Good to see you once again, and great job. And I hope this was helpful to you. A lot of information packed in this half hour. But remember, you can always contact the firm. Just contact Hollis Wright if you have any questions or think you may have a case here. Hey, thanks so much, as always, for joining us. We're very grateful for your time and you hanging out here with us each and every Sunday night. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on The Attorneys. Have a great week, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.